All right, so explanatory style is another way of talking about optimism and pessimism. Here we have the pessimistic version of the little train who could. This one's called the little engine who just plain gives up. I know I can't. I know I can't. A negative explanatory style looks a lot like pessimism. A negative explanatory style says bad things happen to me, that I am not effective, that the world is unpredictable. Whereas a positive explanatory style or an optimistic explanatory style says, my efforts are worthwhile, that, I have the skills, I can do it, that the world is predictable, that, this too shall pass. Those kinds of things are part of the positive explanatory style. So what they have found is that people who are more optimistic, who tend to assume good things, tend to be more resilient, less affected by stress than people who have a more negative or helpless kind of explanatory style. It's a tightrope walk, though, with a positive explanatory style, because if a person is too optimistic and says, I'm sure that this lump is fine, I'll just ignore it, it'll go away, even as it's growing and all sorts of bad things are happening, but the person's like, I'm sure it'll be fine. Everything always works out in the end. That's what we call a Pollyanna, a person who denies reality. You don't want to be a Pollyanna, in part because of exactly that example I just gave. A Pollyanna who ignores signs of actual threat or actual danger is at higher risk than a person with a little bit of a negative explanatory style, but at least accurately notices when there are threats or possible harm that could come. So it's not like, we're not trying to encourage anybody to have sort of like Pollyanna levels of optimism. We're looking for a person to have optimism that is, rooted in reality. So having an upbeat outlook is better than having a downbeat outlook, is basically the premise. Another factor that affects resilience is social support. So here I have a picture that I pulled off the internet of a bunch of people who I don't know, but I see a hospital in the background. So the story I made up about this picture is that these are a bunch of teammates or something that are all getting ready to go into the hospital and visit their friend who has, an injury or an illness, and they're there to support their friend, their teammate. That kind of social support really can buffer a person from the harm of, stressful situations. And so even though, for example, getting married or having a baby can be very stressful, life-changing events, even the death of a loved one can be very stressful, life-changing events, for a lot of people, there's social support to help work through those situations so that you're not alone and you're not just going through this, all these changes that are difficult. I mean, change is always difficult and stressful, but if you have social support, if you're a newlywed and you can turn to your parents or friends who are married or something and look for, sorry, my alarm's going off. You can look to other people for reassurance that what you're going through is normal, or that this will pass, this is just a phase, or other things. It can just make things a lot less stressful. So social support is super important. The good news is that the people who report having the most changes in their lives, they're graduating high school, they're graduating college, they're going to the military, they're getting married, they're having babies. This tends to happen in the young adulthood years. As if we think about it, it's somewhere probably between 18 and 25 when you have probably the biggest changes going on in your life. Well, if you look at this graph, this is showing us on the x-axis the different age brackets, and then on the y-axis it's showing us those who are reporting having social support available to them. And so you'll notice that those very years when you have the most changes going on that could be potentially the most stressful, you also have the most social support. So that's really an encouraging thing that there's sort of this nice match between, okay, stressful times in our lives, but also a lot of social support to see us through that. So what can we do to manage our stress? How can we help keep ourselves as healthy as we can, even though everybody's life has some degree of stress? One thing that has been shown in lots of different studies to be really effective for managing stress is aerobic exercise. So you see in the y-axis the evaluation before any kind of treatment, and then the evaluation after treatment. And then on the y-axis is their depression score. So you see that the green bar is for the aerobic exercise group, and you see that their depression score drops dramatically after engaging in aerobic exercise for some period of time. So aerobic exercise is really super useful in helping to dissipate stress reactions. Now let's think about the generalized adaptation syndrome again, and how it advocates that you have the capability to cope with a stressor, at the fight or flight level of coping with a stressor for about 20 minutes. Have you ever noticed that every health-related guidance, not about weight loss, but health-related guidance says you should exercise 20 minutes a day? Everything says that. And it won't necessarily help you to lose weight per se, but it'll give you all those health benefits of lowering blood pressure, raising good cholesterol levels, like all the things that you want to have happen from stress. Why would from exercise? And why would it be that exercising would do those things in just 20-minute bursts? Well, if you can convince your body that you have had a fight or a flight, you will kick in the part of your nervous system that's called the parasympathetic nervous system that will reverse all the effects of the stressor. So you may have had a slightly stressful day at work or at school. You're just a little bit agitated or whatever. A little bit of cortisol is being secreted, and so your heart rate's a little bit up. You're not digesting your food properly, whatever. You do a 20-minute exercise workout, especially something aerobic where you get your heart rate up, and you'll find that it dissipates those stress hormones and kicks in the parasympathetic nervous system, which will slow down your heart rate, will, slow down your breathing rate, will start digesting your food again, will stop releasing glucose into your bloodstream. Like everything returns back to normal after a bout of aerobic exercise. So if you're a person who's experiencing stress, a lot of us, when we're experiencing stress, the first thing that we want to do is not exercise. We want to maybe eat things that aren't great for us, and we just sort of want to lick our wounds. But if we do a little aerobic exercise, we actually might reverse the effects of all those stress hormones and stress reactions. Another way that you can manage stress is to do it very deliberately using something called a biofeedback machine. Now, back in the olden days when they first invented this, you could only use biofeedback machines in, a doctor's office or your psychologist's office or something like that. Today, you can use your telephone. I just said something antiquated. I said telephone. I meant to say cell phone. You can use your cell phone as a biofeedback machine. You can actually put your finger on the little receptor that is used to log you into your phone, and it can track your heart rate and give you visual feedback about what your heart rate is right now. And you can, using that visual feedback, guide yourself through relaxation techniques and things like that to lower your heartbeat on purpose. And that's the premise behind biofeedback. You have to combine it with some kind of deliberate exercise that you can do. It could be deep breathing, it could be a visualization, it could be meditation. There are lots of different things that you can do to try to reduce your heart rate on purpose, but that's what this is about, is looking at it, seeing that the signals that are on the screen indicate that, okay, your heart rate's up. You're supposed to think, okay, what does this feel like? How am I feeling right now? So that when you're out in the real world, you could recognize those sensations and then maybe implement out in the real world some of the strategies that work to reduce your heart rate while you're on the biofeedback machine. Different things work for different people, so you have to try different strategies. But once you find something that works for you, you can start to implement it out in the regular world. Those of you who might be interested in things like sports psychology and things like that, biofeedback machines are oftentimes used because, when you're trying to perform at your top and you're under stress, you have to figure out a way to calm that down. So biofeedback is one way to manage stress. Meditation is another way to manage stress. And you don't have to do really big transcendental meditation or long protracted periods of meditation. Sitting still and clearing your mind thinking maybe something repetitive so that something new doesn't come in. So that's why they oftentimes use chants like Om or something that works for you to clear your mind. Even for little brief moments of meditation can have beneficial effects as far as managing stress. I'm not the world's greatest meditator. As soon as I start to get into sort of a calm sort of state of mind, I start to think about things like, well, when I get done doing this, I'm going to do these other things. And I realize, oh, wait, I'm not meditating anymore. I'm just planning at this point. That's really common for people with meditation. So it takes practice. You have to just keep trying it. The other thing I struggle with meditation is that sitting in the Indian style position actually can make your hips kind of hurt. I participated in a meditation class, and I looked at the person next to me and I'm like, are your hips hurting too? And they were like, oh yeah. So I asked we had a Buddhist monk that was guiding us, and I said, how can you sit in this position and not have it hurt your hips? And he goes, I've been doing it my whole life. So I would argue you don't have to sit he said, you don't have to sit like that. You can, sit with your legs out front. You could sit sideways. You can sit whatever's working for you. Don't let your hips distract you from the meditation is basically the premise. Another way to manage stress is to do relaxation exercises. And so I got this picture because it's one of these situations where you're supposed to just try and make your perfect circles with the little rake, and it's supposed to be just a relaxing, not a anal retentive kind of pressure thing. It's supposed to, the act of doing it is supposed to be very relaxing. There's other things that you can do that are relaxing that are like that. Usually you're talking about something that's repetitive, something that doesn't take much consciousness to do, but that can be done, sort of automatically. So for me, that's knitting. If I'm knitting for relaxation, I do just straight the same stitch all the time because I'm just trying to have relaxation. If I'm trying to challenge myself and I'm not feeling stressed, then I go ahead and try a pattern that involves, making lace or something like that. So I'm not saying every degree of knitting is considered relaxing. I'm talking about when you're doing something that's repetitive. Some people find that coloring is a really great relaxation tool. During the pandemic, I tried out one of those apps where you can touch the screen to color the different areas. I got to tell you what, that it doesn't have the same relaxation effect. Paper and colored pencils or crayons, that is the relaxation where it's low stakes, you're mindlessly doing it, and you can kind of just get into a flow where you find that you're not really being stressed by other things right now. Your mind kind of cleared out. Different things can provide that kind of relaxation. Some people do fidget toys. Some people play with silly putty. Some people, I'm trying to think of other things that are super repetitive besides the ones that I do. Like my husband shoots archery, and he says it's super relaxing because you have to do the exact same behavior every single time. And it's so he just sort of gets into like this meditative state while he does it. So there are a lot of different things that could serve as relaxation. I'm trying to be creative and think of something that might work for you. So it's got to be a perfect match between something that's simple and redundant enough, but not so simple and redundant that you don't even want to do it, right? Like you don't want it to be punishingly redundant. You want it to be something that you enjoy. It feels good to do it at the time. So here we have that same chart I showed you before to argue for the benefits of aerobic exercise. Now I want you to look at the blue bar, and you see that you don't get as much of a drop in depression scores as you do with the aerobic. It's not as steep of a line, but you see that the drop in the depression scores is meaningful. Like it's a big drop. And so relaxation works really well for reducing depression, which is one thing that can come from stress. All right, that should conclude this chapter. So we only have one chapter after this. So thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you in the next chapter.